Perhaps I was wrong. I'm sorry you won't be joining us.
What a weird dream. It's almost as if I made a choice that could have significantly altered my life in ways I couldn't even possibly imagine. Fuck it, I've got reviews to do. Yeah, The Matrix Path of Neo seems like a good game to kick off 2016 with. So for those of you none that know, The Matrix is a trilogy of cyberpunk movies centered around the war in the future between the humans and the machines. In this war, the machines have imprisoned many of the humans inside a virtual reality construct known as the Matrix. The Matrix itself is a recreation of Earth in the late 90s and early 2000s, around about the point where humanity gave birth to artificial intelligence. This acts as a way of keeping the human race in a dream world while the machines siphon power from their bioelectric energy. However, in this war of man versus machine, there came a prophecy where a systemic anomaly known as the One would free the humans from their captivity and end the war between the machines and the humans, effectively bringing about world peace. For those of you who've been frequenting my channel since 2013, they'd probably already know by this point that I am a big fan of The Matrix. And while some might call the movie as dated, bad, or too confusing for their own good, The Matrix for me has the right blend of elements that make this franchise my favourite movie series of all time. Industrial mixed with cyberpunk imagery, late 90s to early 2000s urban cities, nu metal soundtracks, and a shitload of depth to keep me intrigued with the movie long after I finish watching it. And naturally, with The Matrix being a smash hit in 1999, as the years have rolled on, we've gotten a fair bit of material from the franchise, such as comics, anime, video games, to even an MMO. But the game we're reviewing today is The Matrix Path of Neo, a game in which, unlike the previous Enter the Matrix and The Matrix Online, this game you actually do get to play as Neo. Yeah, surprisingly, neither in Enter the Matrix or The Matrix Online, you only ever got to play as the other red pills aside from Neo. Not that I'm complaining, mind you, I mean, I love the snarky banter between Niobe and Sparks in Enter the Matrix, but no game beforehand ever let you play as Thomas Anderson, and well, that's just weird, man. I mean, wouldn't that be like having a Metal Gear Solid game where instead of playing as Solid Snake you play as... oh no. Anyway, in 2005, Matrix fans the world over rejoiced as Shiny Entertainment finally gave in and gave us the chance to see what it was like to walk in the path of Neo. Jumping right into the story, the game very much follows the basic plotline of the Matrix trilogy as it showcases Neo's journey from a computer hacking nerd into the evangelical savior of the human race from the first movie up until the Matrix Revolutions. Now ordinarily, if this was just a movie-based tie-in video game, I'd just say go off and watch the movies and then call it a day for the plot summary, but, and this is a big but, sorry, the game does have deviations, for the lack of a better word. To be a little bit more specific, the game goes into greater detail about certain elements of Neo's escapades within the Matrix. For example, we get to experience what Neo saw as Tank uploaded the training programs into his mind in order to teach him Kung Fu, which, as it turns out, was a Mortal Kombat-styled arena where Neo must defeat a gnarly old hippie dude with a really cool-looking jacket. Now, although I won't really be discussing the game's plot in as much detail as I would for other games, I will be going over a lot of the expanded elements that this game adds to the overall Matrix canon. Aside from the training programs, there's also a dilapidated building where Neo must meet up with Morpheus, Apoc, Switch, and Trinity, and you can hear cops having a nervous breakdown.
Damn it, we've got to get out of here. That wall just came in. I don't know, we're hallucinating or something.
Seriously man, it's really sad when an action game from 2005 can build up a better horror atmosphere than most modern horror games in this day and age. Another part worth mentioning is the Red Pill rescue missions, which are set shortly before the events of the Matrix Reloaded, where Neo must rescue 5 people of differing backgrounds. And I gotta admit, this is probably one of my favourite parts of the game. And I think a lot of that is mostly attributed to the fact that we get to see a little bit about how some might react when put in the position that Neo once faced. I mean, sure, many might say that they've got nerves of steel and that they can take on anything, but in reality, I think many people's behaviour might mirror that of the neurotic librarian. I mean, hell, some might even mirror Chang Tsung, who uses the Seraph philosophy of kicking someone's ass before having a civil discussion with them. But there is one red pill in this section that actually does make an appearance later on in the game. In a mission called The Key, you'll come across a teen girl being held captive in the Merovingian's nightclub from the Matrix Revolutions, where she expounds about how somebody gave her a magic key. The key in question ends up being a key to the programmer's backdoor, or for those of you that just want to keep it simple, the never-ending hallway of doors. After beating the shit out of the human version of Black Doom, Neo then runs into Asian guy. We'll meet again, Asian guy. I'll show you to just suddenly appear for a few seconds, jump onto the ceiling, then walk out as if nothing ever happened. Just you wait. Anyway, after beating the shit out of people who wouldn't look too out of place in American head charge, Neo and the Key escape the Merovingian's nightclub and close out with a classic line.
You got a good car, dude? 'Cause I ain't riding in no beat-up ride.
Actually, one of the neat little details that I noticed in the Healer mission is that towards the tail end of the mission, you can actually see a newspaper dealing about how Neo actually saved her, which in my opinion is a pretty nice touch. But as I've said earlier, you do get to meet the Key in a later mission in the game. Fast forwarding to the Chateau portion of the Matrix Reloaded, after killing Asian guy, Neo runs after Morpheus and Trinity and the Keymaker only to lose himself into an S&M dungeon. Wow, that's something I never thought I'd say. And after being footy tackled through a wall, Neo finds a sexy looking goth chick who was restrained on a table for what was presumably one night of steamy fun until Neo decided to crash in on the orgy. A brief scrap happens only for the goth chick to let out a powerful scream, rendering the Merovingian goons unconscious.
Hey, aren't you? Nice timing, but don't think I owe you anything.
Now, although it's never explicitly stated in-game, the design, voice, and implied recognition give a pretty clear indication that she's met Neo at some point, and I find it to be a nice nod to continuity within the game's own universe. As Neo and the Key part ways, the Merovingian manages to trap Neo and force him to become a pawn within his game. The Merovingian's game takes place in the distorted dimensions of the Matrix, where Neo must navigate his way through MC Escher's wet dream, and from a design aesthetic, I really do like the look of these levels. And it's levels like this that really make me wish that the Matrix had more video games so it could take advantage of how the level design could be manipulated and twisted to such a degree. After escaping the distorted dimensions, Neo ends up within another section of the Merovingian's S&M dungeon where we see these really fucking creepy gimps that get off on electricity.
Turn on the juice!
Ugh, Jesus man, that's unsettling. Anyway, upon going through the level, twice I might add, Neo meets up with the Key again, who decides out of the goodwill of her heart to help out Neo by giving American Head Charge a little bit more lead in their diet.
Can't you take care of yourself?
Shut your lip, woman!
Anyway, after fighting a guy that wouldn't look out of place in a music video by Marilyn Manson, Neo makes it to the final challenge in the Merovingian's game, where he has to free the key from a program known as the Witch. After vulgar trash talk from the key, her and Neo then defeat the saucy wench, which allows the key to show Neo the exit to the Merovingian's distorted dimensions.
We'll see each other again. I'm sure of it.
And we never see this character again. Oops. Upon rescuing the Keymaker, the next deviation from the plot of The Matrix Reloaded is with 3 missions where Neo, Morpheus and the Keymaker travel through a TV station, a church, and for some reason Parliament House, where we see Jack Thompson?
And I firmly believe that these awful, horrible, violent video games are offensive to our most basic values.
Yeah, I forgot to mention, this game has a weird affinity for meta humor, and I mean like Metal Gear Solid levels of meta. For example, earlier in the game during the Neo vs. Sarah fight, where the fight progresses from the tea house where the fight began and ended in the movie, the fight then continues where they break onto the roof and they fight on wooden poles like all Chinese and Kung Fu style, and then for no reason whatsoever, Neo and Sarah crash into a cinema where they're playing The Matrix Reloaded. Seriously, it's even playing the tea house fights that's supposed to be happening like right now, and Neo and Seraph are just looking at it thinking, what the fuck?
Instant cassettes. They're out in stores before the movie is finished.
And then, as if that wasn't weird enough, Neo and Seraph literally enter the movie, which makes me wonder whether or not they passed by Arnold Schwarzenegger from Last Action Hero. All throughout the game, I've counted 3 instances where the game does this, the first of which being the aforementioned cinema scene, and the second being the Jack Thompson parody. As for the third instance, I'm going to be saving that one for last, but let's just say you haven't seen anything yet. Upon reaching the point of the Matrix Revolutions, however, one thing you'll notice right off the bat is that there really isn't any missions relating to the third movie. And that's something that's always puzzled me because, for the most part, the Matrix Revolutions took place in the real world, and that really isn't any excuse as to why there couldn't be any missions based upon them. I mean, hell, you've practically shown what could have been a fun gameplay sequence with the Neo vs. Bane fight aboard the Logos, but instead, it just skips right to the final battle with Agent Smith. So for those of you who've already seen The Matrix Revolutions, you'd assume that it'd play out as normal and have Neo and Smith fight, only for Neo to lose, then realise that his death was inevitable and do his Jesus thing, yada yada yada. But if you recall, I mentioned that there was one third final moment of meta in this game. So, this is the prelude to said meta, and I just want to warn you guys, this reaches time paradox levels of confusion. But instead, what follows is Neo winning the fight against Agent Smith. And this makes no sense, because Neo was supposed to realise that his struggle against Agent Smith, his purpose, is to realise that in order for the equation to be balanced, there needs to be some kind of elimination of the Force to unbalance it, which in this case is Neo. And Agent Smith, of course, is being the Force that can unbalance us. And furthermore, if Neo wins the fight, then that means that he... And then they all went out to Jizzlebee's for ice cream sundaes. And that, my children, is the story of Star Wars. After creating a time paradox, much to Colonel Campbell's chagrin, we're then suddenly greeted into a white room with 2 snazzy-looking chairs where 2 Atari sprites greet themselves as Andy and a pre-sex changed Lana Wachowski.
Hi, I'm Andy Wachowski.
And I'm Larry Wachowski.
What the flying fudge-knuckers. Yeah, I'm pretty sure not even Hideo Kojima even has meta powers to this extent, because the Wachowskis quite literally stop the game in its tracks and begin talking about how kick-ass you've become because you've nearly beaten the game, and then they just start talking...
You see, at this point in the story, Neo stands on the verge of Satori, ready to resolve the paradox of choice and choicelessness, of free will versus fate, but that can only be achieved through an act of surrender, which occurs after he has abandoned the perspectival nature of truth, accepting the totality of present consciousness, which ultimately allows an evolutionary transition, transcending the Cartesian dilemma through the emergence of delimited spirit, which then provides the world with a choice of a third path, the path of...
Shut up!
Shit. Sorry.
The Wachowski brothers then go on about how even they think the Jesus ending of Revolutions kinda sucked, and so they decided to replace it with a little something that they call...
It's time for a little Hulk vs. Galactus action.
Now, before I continue, I just want to state something here. Simultaneously, this betters and worsens the ending to The Matrix Revolutions, as This new ending is somehow a weird combination of weird, stupid, and radical all at the same time. After defeating Agent Smith, Neo arises from the crater to find the other Smiths running away, while bits and pieces of debris begin forming into
one massive monster Mega Smith.
I mean, on the one hand, this is really out of place considering that The Matrix, although stylistic, was never a movie that was without substance when it came to its plot. And though many like to complain that the movies are pretentious because they explore philosophical and psychological meanings, having the ending of your movie suddenly retcon to Neo fights a giant robot feels really fucking weird. And stupid considering that Neo needs to die in order for the plague of Agent Smiths to have fulfilled their purpose and ultimately return to the source after their purpose has been completed. On the other hand, we get to fight a giant robot. Fuck yeah. So upon grabbing a pair of giant sunglasses, who's there for some reason, Neo does battle with the Mega Smith and manages to defeat it, which ends the Smith virus, which also in turn ends the war, except that Neo lives and they play We Are the Champions by Queen because, I don't know, it ends on a cool looking sunset with stock footage and... man, that ending was weak. Again, not that the Jesus thing was really any better, but at least it felt thematically appropriate for what the Wachowskis were going for. I mean, having your final boss be a giant robot works well for a video game, but for an ending to the Matrix trilogy, it's pretty much about as appropriate as giving Michael Myers a laser cannon. Sure, it might look really fucking cool, but it's an idea that seems better suited to the realms of fanfiction than it does a video game or movie. But overall, as a movie-based tie-in game, the story is weird, yet an enjoyable one all the same. It covers the major events upon all three Matrix movies, and it does have a few nice expansions here and there, which as a fan of the Matrix series I very much do appreciate. But my biggest point of criticism comes from the weird as fuck ending, for reasons which I've already covered. But overall, the plot isn't too bad. In fact, I think it's thanks to the meta-humor thrown in for comedic effect that I really do enjoy this story. On the gameplay side of things, Neo comes with a standard action game moveset. You can perform basic punches and kicks by pressing the triangle button and grapple enemies by pressing the circle button. By combining the grapple and attack moves, this is where the game gets creative in terms of its fun factor. One of the great pleasures of the Matrix path of Neo is really the amount of moves you can pull off, which has the blurb on the back of the cover list over 600 martial arts and fighting moves.
Something is definitely wrong here.
Now, though many would probably consider that bullshit, considering that for 600 moves would probably require some of the most asinine timing and button inputs to ever pull off, but I'm gonna be honest here. As someone who's played this game annually since 2005, I'm still finding out new moves that I've never seen before. And when you consider that all the combo moves with swords, staffs, axes, and various other crap, I'm not entirely unshaken about the whole 600 kung fu moves being in the game. Getting back on track, however, each move usually requires one key thing in order to pull them off. Focus. By pressing the L1 button, Neo has the ability to move faster, hit harder, and perform wicked combat moves such as the Hyper Strike combo, machine gun kicks, the Killing Blow, and my personal favourite, the Mega Punch, just to name a few.
Whoa! Now that's cool!
As for what's in Neo's arsenal aside from his fist, the path of Neo allows you to use a vast array of guns ranging from pistols, machine guns, grenade launchers, and submachine guns to even melee weapons like staffs, swords, axes, and wouldn't you believe it, even a flagpole.
No, but it wouldn't surprise me now.
In terms of functionality, the weapons work just as well as you'd expect them to, although some weapons will break after a certain time, but you'll have likely pummeled your enemies into submission before that ever happens. However, like many things in the Matrix, one of your best friends when using weapons of all types is of course focus. It allows your shots to become more accurate, and when you're using guns, swords, or staffs, it allows your combos to become really cool and hardcore to the extreme, man. But if I was to name something about the gameplay that I didn't like, that would probably be the hastily introduced flight controls during the Neo vs. Smith battle in the Matrix Revolutions. And while it isn't really anything to write home about, I would have at least liked something with a bit more flair to it than basic punches and kicks in the air. Although that being said, it is really amusing to watch Neo and Smith fling each other into buildings and causing mayhem and destruction wherever they go. One last gameplay feature I have to talk about is the Ant-Man principles. Putting it bluntly, it's basically just an upgrade screen where you can obtain stylized kung fu moves as well as abilities to use in certain situations like heal others or jackpot. In addition to gaining abilities with upgrades, you can also acquire Neo's trademark moves such as the bullet dodge as you progress throughout the game. In terms of mission structure, the path of Neo is set up in a linear fashion where your objective is very much based upon the events that happen in the movie, such as escaping from the Metacortec building in the first movie or fighting against Agent Smith in the Burly Brawl. As a whole though, the players should find themselves with a clear and concise idea of what they need to do and how they need to go about it, as there is very little room for deviations aside from the odd nook and cranny that hides secrets like health and focus refills. Graphics wise, the Matrix Path of Neo looks very standard for a mid-generation PS2 game, although there are some instances where characters and objects look more or less like highly textured PS1 models, and one big example of that is with many of the facial animations for secondary characters. Speaking of which, a point of praise I'd like to give this game is for its fighting animations during combat, because although it does sometimes look a little bit silly with the windmill attack as I call it, the moves do look badass all the same. I mean, come on. Any game that has an attack where you grab two enemies and swing them around to pummel an enemy into submission, it at least shows that the developers did care about this game. Another plus to this game's presentation will be the use of the soundtrack thanks to Don Davis' score in conjunction with other techno artists like Juno Reactor and Tobias Enhus. And while I personally would have liked to have seen some new metal tracks return as heard in The Matrix Reloaded, the first movie, and Enter the Matrix, in the Path of Neo it does still have some top-notch tracks such as the nightclub music from the Red Pill Rescue mission The Key, to the track that plays during the Belly Brawl, and hell, even the Crystal Method remix of Free Your Mind. However, for everything good, there's usually something bad, and in this case it would probably be with the game's FMV cutscenes taken from the films themselves. Not to say that the footage they use is bad necessarily, but from the way it's cut together it leads to some wacky looking clips.
I believe this night holds for each and every one of us the very meaning of our lives.
I mean, for the first time player watching these cutscenes, I would be surprised if they knew what the hell was going on, because when I played this game as a kid, I sure as hell didn't.
What the hell are you boys doing?
However, to end this segment on a positive note would be the voice acting, as it has Lawrence Fishburne reprising his role as Morpheus from the movies. Where were Keanu Reeves, Carrie-Anne Moss, and Hugo Weaving, I hear you ask? Fucked if I know. Andrew Bowen as Neo sounds like he has a cold sometimes, and Trinity, despite having Jennifer Hale as her voice actress, sometimes I think she gets a little bit too close to being Basilisk Samus Fushibayashi, and out of all three, I think Corey Burton sounds really similar to Hugo Weaving and gets his character down quite well. As for the rest, it's a passing resemblance at best, especially you, Nico Futterman, doing a bad Niobe voice. That's not Jada Pinkett Smith! And speaking of which, where the hell is Ghost? But to end this also on a positive note, one thing I do love about the game is the destructive environments that react to Neo smashing enemies through terrain, which makes for a nice effect, and I'd say Neo really leaves an impact on the environment. Anyway, with everything that's been said and done, what is my opinion on The Matrix Path of Neo? Well, if my gushing was anything to go by, then I think you know by now how I feel about this game. In terms of recommendations, if you're a fan of The Matrix, this is definitely leagues beyond Enter the Matrix, and finally delivers the video game experience that people wanted out of The Matrix to begin with, so I'd definitely recommend this game to fans of the movies who wish to walk down the path of Neo. But even if you've never seen the movies before and you like what you've seen in this review, then by all means go for it, because as a kid of 8 years old when I first played this game, I hadn't seen the movies before either, and I still had a blast with this game, and I still do to this day. Maybe I'm just rambling here, but this game has been a very big part of my gaming childhood, so to speak. It told me that even though a game might not have as much polish or attention to detail as Metal Gear Solid, or as fluent a combat system as Devil May Cry 3, if the developers are creative enough to put in a windmill attack, then chances are this game's gonna be pretty fucking good despite being a movie-based tie-in. Well, on that note, I'm Skully, keep it new metal, and I'll have to go put this game back where it belongs. Take care. What the? Something is definitely wrong here.